The topic of industry plants is definitely a hot one. Some people
hate the term
and think it's overused, and other people love to just sling it around to talk about any artist that blows up out of nowhere. So what are we gonna do today? We're gonna do an industry plant tier list. But before we get into it, what is an industry plant? Let's define it. So an industry plant, I mean, everyone sort of has their own definition, but when I think of the word industry plant, I think of someone who has a massive budget and like team of people behind their music, but they publicly claim that they're independent to seem DIY when like they're really not. Are industry plants a bad thing? Are industry plants even real? That's the $1 million question, and we're gonna answer it at the end of this video, so stay tuned. But first, let's get into the tier list. So let's kick it off by talking about Lana Del Rey. Lana came out of nowhere with video games. They planted her like a seed in the ground. The video games, she came from nowhere. Okay, but like, no. Lana had been making music for years before video games came out. It's not like she didn't do any practice or like anything at all in music and then all of a sudden became a star with one song. She had been under the name Lizzie Grant for like years before video games came out. She'd been playing club gigs and entering songwriting contests, and naturally people started to catch on to her. Lana said herself that like she didn't come from a wealthy family, which I mean, yeah, anyone can just say that, but also we don't know her deal. Everyone just likes to act like they know a celebrity's deal when how would we? Like, we don't know them. But my point is, even if Lana's label was trying to make her look DIY and homegrown or whatever, Lana's controversial for other reasons, definitely. Her being an industry plant shouldn't be one of those reasons. So let's give her a C tier. I think that calling Lana an industry plant sort of just belittles all the hard work she put into refining her craft, developing her vision throughout the many years before she was actually signed to a label. She didn't just come out of nowhere. You just didn't hear about her until she got signed, which is usually how it goes because that's the label's job. Like, that's what they do. And even if she did come from a lot of money, which she says she didn't, but even if she did, that doesn't really take away from how real the messages are in her music and how vulnerable she gets, especially in her older stuff. Like, clearly she was going through it as a kid. She's not S tier because I just don't really like her anymore. It's a shame because I used to love her in high school. Like, I loved her, but now I'm just kind of like, shut up. Let's move on to Tramp Stamps. There's no way you haven't heard of them by now. There's just no way. But if you haven't, let's talk about them. So Tramp Stamps is a band that rose to infamy on TikTok for their song about how they'd rather die than sleep with a straight white guy. And their pop punk music and like brightly colored hair aesthetic quickly gained them this like underground fan base until they went viral on TikTok and people just started to absolutely roast them. And the first thing that made people question their authenticity was when they posted this video that was like, oh, like, how emo are these songs or whatever, and like a My Chemical Romance song came on and like two of the members just didn't recognize the song. They didn't recognize the song! So after doing some digging, people online found that Tramp Stamps weren't actually these three random people that were friends. They'd actually all been part of the industry and had music industry affiliations for years at that point. The drummer had been producing music for years. Her music had been on MTV, DirecTV, Sephora, and like NFL, to name a couple. And the lead singer and guitarist both had deals with Dr. Luke. But how did they get those connections in the first place? We don't know. Maybe they were in the industry busting ass for years and they made these friends along the way. And if the drummer had been making music for years, it makes sense that she's had her music in stuff like MTV, NFL, Sephora. It makes sense that she has these brand deals if she'd been making music for that long. It's not like she made a song yesterday and all of a sudden it's in MTV. But in terms of their music being authentic, it's pretty obvious why people would question them and be quick to call them a fraud, because their like top song is about how they would rather than sleep with a straight white guy. But one of the members is married to none other than a straight white guy. What do we believe? Let's give them F tier. They're pretty cringe. If they were actually industry plants, whoever planted them did a really horrible job. It seems like they don't really care about the messages they preach in their songs. They're just trying to be like edgy and prey on like women to listen to their music. And they seemed pretty prepared for fame, even though they were just 3 girls that wrote a song drunk at a bar. But if they'd been in the industry for years, then at the same time, it was smart of them to prepare for fame so that they could capitalize on when they became famous, like pretty quickly after they became famous. But if they were planted by the industry, if Uncle Industry was sitting upon his mighty throne, maniacally laughing as he picked them up and slammed them into the stratosphere, I don't think anyone would look at Tramp Stamps and be like, oh yeah, young people are gonna love this. They're gonna totally eat this up. Unless you're like 70 or above, maybe. And at the end of the day, no one knows for a fact if they have this like big corporate backing that everyone's accusing them of having. They all probably busted ass and worked hard in the industry for a while to get the opportunity to start their own solo thing, but they just like suck. They're just cringe people. Next, we got Clairo. Clairo is known for her DIY aesthetic. She rose to fame on YouTube with songs like Pretty Girl, with the music video looking like it took like 10 minutes to film on her MacBook camera. And people love to criticize her because they don't think that she worked for her fame. They think that her dad did it all for her because he's a marketing executive at Converse. They think it was all him.
He manufactured Clairo.
Because she seemingly did come out of nowhere. But Clairo had been uploading cover songs to YouTube for a while before Pretty Girl came out. Like, that wasn't just the first thing that she put out into the atmosphere. And yeah, obviously Clairo probably had a lot easier of a time getting in touch with labels after Pretty Girl blew up because Pretty Girl blew up and labels probably noticed her because of that. But Pretty Girl was an independent release. She just like put it out there. And yeah, I'm sure her dad was a great resource to her after Pretty Girl blew up and telling her who she should be talking to and helping her get deals and stuff. What do you expect, really? She's this 14-year-old girl putting out a song. If her parents are in her life, you really don't think they're gonna help. And yeah, I'm sure her dad helped her land brand deals that she wouldn't have gotten if her dad wasn't the chief marketing executive at Converse. But her dad didn't make Pretty Girl. Mr. Cottrell didn't sit behind his big desk and go, you know, I'm gonna write this song and I'm gonna make my daughter sing it. Let's give her an S tier. Clairo's music seems genuine. Like, obviously, she's playing a part and coming up with this stuff. It's not just her dad puppet mastering her behind the scenes. It's ridiculous. And it seems like the stuff she sings about does come from her own personal experiences, and it's not just something she's saying so that she can make money. Like, I don't think... If her dad's the chief marketing executive at Converse, then she didn't have to worry about money when she was 14 years old. She was probably just, like, having fun and making music. She's got a solid voice. She's a great live performer. She seems like a pretty nice person. I've never heard anyone say anything bad about her after meeting her in person. And yeah, she definitely has the privilege of having a dad that has money and Converse. Her dad has money and shoes. But it's not like her rich dad used his money and his shoes to manufacture Clairo's music career. Not an industry plant. And even if Clairo was an industry plant, clearly her fans don't care. Like, she has such a loyal fan base. You can't really manufacture that. Like, people have just gotta like you. Money can't really buy that. So I think calling Clairo an industry plant belittles her hard work. So my overarching point of this whole video is that it seems like successful women earn the title industry plant more frequently than men do. I mean, don't get me wrong, in doing my research, there were definitely male names that came up when I was looking up who's an industry plant. But a lot of the time, people were talking about women and just being like, oh, you know, like, they didn't do that. The industry did that to them. I don't know, it just seems like a term that people use to call successful people either because they're jealous or they want to give some alternate explanation to how these people could have possibly found success. It's not like they worked hard. It was all handed to them by the industry. And if you think that someone should be criticized for being signed to a major label and seemingly blowing up out of nowhere, then you don't really know anything about the industry to begin with. Like, that's the label's job, is to go find people that are incredibly underrated, sign them, and then blow them up. Like, that's what they do. Like, and yeah, it's definitely fishy when artists say publicly that they are independent artists while at the same time being backed by a major label or a team of people, but that doesn't really happen that often. Tramp Stamps are the only exception. They were kind of deceptive about it, making them seem like they were really DIY people when they had industry connections to begin with. That I can see. Obviously, people who come from money have an easier time becoming celebrities if that's the path they want to take. It's expensive to live in LA. It's expensive to have the money to buy instruments and production equipment, voice lessons and stuff. Like, it's expensive. And it's annoying that people have that advantage. I get it. At the same time, no matter how much money you have, you really can't buy creativity. You can't buy talent. You can't buy a loyal fan base of people who like your stuff. That's priceless, really. The talent has to be there in the first place in order for them to take off. And there's loads of talented people out there. But yeah, I mean, if the definition of an industry plant is someone who is trying to deceive the public into thinking that they're DIY and homegrown when they really have a big, massive team behind them, there's really not that many people who actually do that. Usually artists are pretty upfront about, like, hey, I'm signed to a label. That's my thoughts on it, I guess.